the link on Instagram as well.
Yes. Oh, I always forget if I've already done this. Let's see. Did I already add the description? I didn't. Let me do that right now while I'm thinking of it. I hope it'll let me edit description while we're in the video.
I've always wondered whether you can do that.
Let's find out.
Right. Yeah.
If it doesn't work, we'll know immediately, I think. Okay. Oh, and I should link our playlist. I think it's up to date. Let's see. Okay. Where is it? There we go. Alrighty. Okay, I am going to reload the video and see if it worked.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, mine hasn't gone off, so. Although.
Yay, it did work. Okay, cool. Good to know.
Yeah.
At the end of our read-along, it's good to know we can do that. Okay, I will update Twitter. Let's see. Where? Okay, here we go. Okay. Alrighty, I think. Hello. Hi, Jane. Yeah, if you guys are watching, let us know in the comments. We're going to give it a couple minutes as usual. Hello, Eowyn. Very excited to hear your answers on some of these.
Maybe we should guess Eowyn's too.
Okay, so I have Twitter. Okay. Okay, do we want to go ahead and start with the introductory stuff, do you think? Alrighty. So, hi everybody. Welcome to our sadly final Frances Hardinge Read Along live show. This is our wrap up and reflection and like general discussion. We're going to be talking about some highlights and we have some like fun questions prepared. So feel free to share your answers to any of these in the comments. Also, Hannah and I thought it would be kind of fun if for some of the questions we try and guess each other's answers before we reveal it for some extra drama.
Yeah,
so
this could go brilliantly or terribly.
I know there's like at least a few where I'm like, I am very confident that we can both get these, but then there's some where it's like, I don't even know if I know my answer. So it'll be exciting for everybody. Also, I do want to mention that because this is like a general review, we are probably going to be talking spoilers for some of them. But when we get to that point, like there's a few questions where you pretty much can't answer them without spoilers. So when we get to that point, I will put up this banner so that if you've only read a few of the books and you don't want to be spoiled for anything for the others, you can just mute the live show until I take that banner down. obviously we are still going to be discussing all of the books, but there's a lot of it that like we won't like get into spoilers for questions that we don't need to, basically. Let's see. James says, I must admit, I did not finish all the books, but I loved all the ones I did read. Frances Hardinge is now a definite auto-buy author for me. Well, good. Hannah and I did our job.
Yeah, that was the purpose of this project.
It really was to like get more people excited about her books. So good to know. Yeah, and Hannah's information is already in the description box. I also linked our playlist for Frances Hardinge Read Along, which has all our live shows and everything. I think that's up to date. If not, I will do that after. And yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other introductory things. Thank you guys for being here and for reading with us. Whether you did one book or all the books, we have loved having you. Yeah, let's get into the questions. Hannah, anything to add before we jump into the questions?
I don't think so. I think I'm ready.
Alrighty, let's go. Do you want to start with number 1? You can introduce.
Yeah, okay. So the first question is favorite reread. We both had, I think you'd read more than I had when we started.
Yes.
So yeah, okay. So I'm gonna guess. I'm fairly sure that Girls Rock Island is gonna be your answer. I know that's.
And I'm gonna guess that yours is A Face Like Glass. Is that right?
Yes. Well, I mean, it's hard to choose, but I feel like I have more than one answer for most of these.
Okay.
But
you did get mine.
I did get, yeah. I think Girls Rock Island might have actually been mine too, because I'd reread A Face Like Glass before. I could read it more than once, but I had only read Girls Rock Island once before. I knew I liked it, but I hadn't quite realised like how much I love it.
Okay. So like your favorite book that you had read before was A Face Like Glass, but your like most pleasant surprise was Girls Rock Island?
I don't think it was the most surprising. It was just the one I had the most fun rediscovering, I guess.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, so of the books that we hadn't read before, our favorite new read. So for me, the only ones I hadn't read were the sequel I can never remember the name of, Flytrap, and then Deep Light and Unraveler. And then what were the new ones that you read?
I read quite a few. I think I'd only read about half of them before.
Okay.
So Unraveler, obviously. So all the recent ones, A Skin Full of Shadows and Deep Light, and also Cuckoo Song, and also the sequel, Twilight Robbery, were all new to me.
I am going to guess that your favorite of those is Cuckoo Song.
Do you want me to guess yours before?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, seeing as you only had 3, I'm going to guess Unraveler.
Yes. Correct. So was it Cuckoo Song? It was between that one, or if I had to, I know you also really liked Unraveler, so I guess those would be my two options.
It was between those two, definitely.
Okay, good. Eowyn said her favorite reread, this is for reread, I think, is either Girls Rock Island or Cuckoo Song, but it's a tough question. Yeah, these are all going to be tough questions pretty much.
Yeah, I think Cuckoo Song must be a really good one on reread, because once you know that,
yes,
it must.
I agree. Yeah. Yep. Okay, and on to number 3. I think it's your turn, Hannah.
Mm-hmm. The third one is most surprising reread. This was quite hard to guess, but I thought yours might be Cuckoo Song, because you know what? I wrote this down and then I can't remember why I thought it would be this. But I think, if I remember correctly, in our discussion, there were sort of some things about it that you'd forgotten and that you enjoyed coming back to. I really have no idea, though.
Well, I know that you said earlier that Gulfstruck Island is the one that you had like the most fun rereading or rediscovering. So I guess I could just guess that one. I guess I'll go with Gulfstruck Island.
Yeah, see, this is me just being confusing and inconsistent with myself. But I put down Verdigris Deep for this one because, like, Gulfstruck Island I knew I liked, and I liked it more, but Verdigris Deep I remembered being okay, and then really loved. So it was
okay. It's what's funny is I put Verdigris Deep as well. Yeah, I think I was trying to decide between that one and Cuckoo Song because you're right. There were a lot of things about that one that I had forgotten and that I really loved. But I think I had kind of a similar experience with Verdigris Deep. Like I gave it 5 stars the first time too, but I think that was one of the first books I had read from her. And so even though I remembered loving it, I had kind of thought by the time we were doing this read along, I was like, oh, well, I probably was new to her books and I don't know, almost like I was still surprised by how much I liked her books, if that makes sense. But yeah, Cuckoo Song would definitely be the follow-up, the runner-up for me. Jane's favorite new read was A Face Like Glass. Nice. Eowyn said she thinks most surprising was Gulfstruck Island or A Skin Full of Shadows. Yeah, I was a little surprised about A Skin Full of Shadows as well. We'll get to that in our ranking of the books, which I don't think we're going to try and guess each other's ranking. I think that would be
difficult.
Way too difficult. I can barely figure out my own rankings. So, okay. Next question. Okay, this is one of the ones I think we know. Least favorite book. I am like 90% sure, Hannah, that that's The Lie Tree for you.
Yep, I'm pretty sure yours is Deep Light.
Good job, team. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I guess we both dislike so few that it's obvious.
Right. There was really only one for each of us where we were talking like I actively did not like parts of this. So yeah, I think that was one of the questions where I'm like, okay, I know we're at least gonna get one of these right. Eowyn said Verdigris Deep I loved first time around, but I don't think I was emotionally ready for a reread with that one. Yeah. I had forgotten how the kind of emotional that book was. Because I tend to think of it as in terms of like how good the like creepy fantasy stuff is done and how much I love the main character and like how messy the friendship is, but it is a very emotional one.
Yeah. I kind of also wonder if I was too young for Verdigris Deep the first time, because a lot of that emotional stuff is subtext or stuff you only pick up after you've been in relationships like that.
Yeah, like the toxic friendship situation.
I know books are aimed at children, but again, like this is what we've been talking about the whole way through. But I don't think I question whether they're actually for children. Or like children can obviously enjoy them, but
yeah,
I think children reading it will miss a lot.
Yeah. Eowyn's least favorite was Fly By Night. Yeah, that was not one of my favorites either. Like that, like there are things that I really love about that series, but that was one of the ones that after, like, since doing this read along, I actually lowered my rating for those. I mean, they were still 4 stars, but
yeah, I like her writing's definitely come a long way since Fly By Night.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one is maybe the hardest question. Favorite main character, and I know you love Halpin, so that's my guess.
Okay, my guess for you. Let me look at my shelves real quick to see if I. Okay, so here's my reasoning. Is I know that A Face Like Glass is like your favorite book, but I don't, and I know you love Neverfell, but I don't know if you love her separately as much as you like love her as the main character. So I'm gonna guess that your favorite is actually Nettle from Unraveler.
That is a very good guess. yeah, I really really struggled to put down an answer for this, but
I
yeah,
love
I
them
think I
all
would
so
agree. I do
much.
love Nettle. Um,
And you're right on mine. Hathen is my favorite. We're doing pretty good at this.
yeah,
I'm impressed with
we're
this.
not keeping count, but you're doing
Yeah.
very well. Hi, Julia.
Hi, Julia. So you missed our spiel at the beginning, and I know that you don't always care about spoilers, but we are going to give a little spoiler warning banner for when we get into some of these because I know that you've read some of the books and not all the others. Um, okay. Okay, so speaking of spoiler banner, I'm gonna have to put it up for this one. Um, anyone said Hathen, Hark, or Ryan? I love Ryan too. I honestly like. I considered I considered putting him as my favorite, but I think it was mostly that I had forgotten how much I loved him um, as a character. I don't know.
Yeah,
Like
I also think
we always
yeah
talk about the main characters in the
yeah
same
all
way,
of
where
them are
it's
so similar that it's hard to choose between them.
like similar in a distinctive way somehow. Like I think Nettle is a great example of the kinds of main characters that Frances Harding writes, and Hathen too to an extent. But it's like, yeah, it's like I love similar things about all of them, even though they're not all similar characters. Or they feel different enough that I'm not like, ugh, this again. Although to be fair, she also does main character tropes that I just love. So yes, strategic muting is encouraged. Okay, so here comes our first spoiler question. Um, favorite villain. And if you've only read a few of her books, I just want to tell you, this is almost certainly a spoiler question. So putting that up now. Okay, so guessing. I honestly, did I even have a guess for you for this one? Okay, I did apparently. I have two guesses for you. I'm kind of cheating. My only my only thoughts are I think I remember you talking about how the villain of Cuckoo Song was really interesting, and you kind of can't blame him for everything he does. Or like you can see where he's coming from. And then that my other guess would be the Grand Steward from A Face Like Glass, because he's not like a typical villain for her in a lot of ways. And I guess you could even argue that he's not the main villain of that book, but those are my best guesses.
Okay, my guess for you was Lady Tamarind from Fly By Night because you've talked all the way through about how she was intriguing and interesting
Yes.
and unpredictable.
Yeah. I didn't hide my cards very well. Yes, Lady Tamarind is my favorite.
Yeah, you were 50% right. I had two answers, and one of them was the Shrike from Cuckoo Song.
Okay.
Because yeah, for the reasons you said, because I think he's really interesting and morally grey, and I usually don't do well with moral greyness, but I think I mind it less in villains than in heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one, so I always struggle with favorite villain because I can't tell whether it's the best written villain or like villain you root for, like
Yeah.
ways to interpret the question. But I also think, in terms of scariest villain, I definitely think Camber from Gutstruck Island
Yeah,
is terrifying because
I agree.
that's, her other villains are kind of supernatural or, a bit fantastical, but Camber could be a real person.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's like a rule following villain, which is like even scarier. Um yeah, I think that's a good answer. Okay, I think we are done with the spoilers for now. Um
Anyone's saying the Grand Steward too.
yeah, he's a good one. Julia said, I love tuning into these lives because you always get me hyped to keep reading Frances Harding. Yes, yes. What was the. Okay, you've read Cuckoo Song. I don't remember if you read Verdigris Deep, but there's like a mom in that one that I think you'll love. I feel like we mentioned that last time too, but just to keep you intrigued, Julia.
Okay, is it my turn? I think.
Yes.
So the next one is going to be a spoiler one again, definitely. Is favorite twist. And I think I'm guessing Cuckoo Song for you because you also talk a lot about how you like changeling stories.
Yes. I guess I can tell you now. Yeah, you're right. I didn't really have a guess for you. At least I don't think I did. I mean, did I write anything down? No, that's helpful. I'm not really sure. If I just had to pick something, I don't know. This is a wild guess. I'm gonna say maybe A Skin Full of Shadows, just because like I feel like that's one of the books where it's like you think that you know the kind of creepy thing that's happening, and then it's like even worse than you thought. But I don't know. I don't really have a good guess for this one.
Yeah, it was hard. I think, but I ended up with Unraveler. I think was my
Mm.
choice in the end because the twist with Tansy is just
Mm.
devastating.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of them are betrayals where someone you think is nice, it turns out not to. But I think the kind of relationship that Nettle has with Tansy is makes it a particular kind of betrayal, and the reasons
Yeah.
for it are just so sad.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good one. That's the first and only so far twist that I actually did figure out. Um, well, because we talked about this, it's like what would be the most devastating like person. So yeah, that's a good one. Um, should I leave the spoilers up for comments? Ghost Trick Island is a good one too. I thought about that one actually as my answer. Um, yes, Awen also wants you to keep reading Frances Harding, and you know you'll have several people to talk to about her books. So just saying. Um, okay. And okay, favorite friendship. Also a difficult one. Okay, so for you, I'm a little worried that I just keep defaulting to A Face Like Glass because I know that's like one of your favorites, but I'm gonna say that it could have been Neverfell and don't tell me her name. What is her name? I can't think of her name.
Zoel.
Zoelle. Yes, thank you. That was my guess for you.
Interesting, because that was also my guess for you. Which, yeah, I wasn't sure either. Because there are so many great friendships, but
Yeah.
I know you like kind of their relationship of never felt like hugging her to goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a good guess for me because that is also one of the ones I considered. I think my answer, and I'll have to wait and see after it's been longer since I read it, but the one that's standing out for me most is Nettle and Kellen because I just love how they balance each other and how like I don't know. Maybe it's also because like some of the quotes we shared were stuff about like if I just have the other person here, nothing too bad can happen. And I'm like, so that's my answer for right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My actual answer was Cuckoo Song. I think Trista, Penn, and Violet are just
Oh,
too precious.
that's a good one. That's a good one. Um, okay, this is so funny. I just went to like my notes, and apparently I had guessed that for you. I had guessed Trista and Penn, and then I forgot that. So half credit, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, that's a good one. Let's see. Anyone says unpopular opinion, Hark and Jelt because issues and complicated emotions, but also Hark and Seraphin. Yeah, I think like in terms of one of the best written friendships, I think Hark and Jelt is definitely up there. Um, not my favorite, but certainly noteworthy. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a realistic toxic relationship.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, Huck and Seraphine is an interesting one too, though.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Anyone feels vindicated. You should. It's like it's a really well written relationship, even if it's not fun to read about.
Okay. The next one is favorite funny moment. I actually didn't write anything down for you, which is unhelpful. I think because I struggled to actually remember what the funny moments were
Yeah.
amongst the emotional moments. but I, I really have no idea. I think I know we both. Well, you mentioned the funny moments in Cuckoo Song quite a bit. Some of the stuff Pen does, especially when she pretends to be hit by a car.
Yeah. That is a good guess. My only guess that I had for you is I remember you talking about the scenes in Deep Light where Hark is like, he's my friend, and then somebody's like,
I'd forgotten about those.
You're really bad at this though. That was my only guess, but like, yeah, I had a hard time with this one too. The actual answer I put down for me, although I do love the ones in Cuckoo Song, is that scene in Gullstruck Island where there's like that bird, like a fake lobster, and like whatever the other thing was, and they're in this like 3-way standoff, and they're like, nobody move, or I break the lobster or something. Like, that was the one that I remembered because
that is a great one. I'd forgotten about that one.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorites, and it's also because like everything else up to that point has been like so tense and scary, and then that happens, and one of the characters is like, "This is ridiculous." So,
yeah, my actual answer is the same as the one that Awen's just said. It's the bit in Twilight Robbery where they're all dressed up as a horse.
That line about "come as a clatter horse party" was like really funny. That's a good one. I'd forgotten about that too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's a really good one as well. The selling soap to. Like,
yes. Yeah. I love that too. Okay, and then I think our last like regular question for now, or I guess like last in this section, is favorite setting. I feel pretty confident I know yours. I think it's Caverna. I remember that we talked about that a lot, so that's my guess for you.
Yeah, I'll tell you, right. And
Good.
for you, I think I put down the Deep Wilds because it has that like fairy tale kind of feeling.
Yeah, you're right on mine as well. Yeah, Caverna, like it was a close second though. I kept going back and forth between which one I wanted to actually put down. Yeah, I love that. So we're so in sync.
We are the same person.
Yeah. I love that. I love that is starting to become apparent to like bystanders as well. Yeah, she does settings so well. But I feel like Caverna and the Deep Wilds are ones that are like quintessential, like it's like everything she does like turned up to 11.
I was just listing them all.
Yeah. I thought about Gullstruck Island too, because I feel like that's one of the ones that is like, it's so interesting, but the way she explains the world is so easy to follow. Like just as writing, I think that's really impressive. Like I love that section at the beginning where like you're hearing about all the different like languages that developed and like the Nundisruth, which like not under this roof. Like I just find that fascinating. So
yeah,
I love that one.
I think Gullstruck Island and also the Fly By Night world as well. They're both worlds where she really thought through all the consequences of the idea she created.
Yes.
Like with the in Twilight Robbery with all the good, I've forgotten what their names are now, but all the like gods.
Yeah. The Beloveds, I think.
The Beloveds, yes. Yeah, and the volcanoes in Gullstruck Island. I think it's so interesting.
Yes, that was one of my favorite parts. The mountains. Yeah, I feel like she does one of the things that we've talked about really enjoying from her, and I feel like there are books that you specifically see this a lot, like you were saying, but I feel like in general she's just really good at thinking through like implications and consequences, and like I don't know that there's ever been a book of hers where she like tells you a detail and it's like, okay, but what would that mean? It's like she pretty much always does that. Like there's a few things where she throws something in and you're like, well, I want that to be explored more. That's like really interesting. But I don't ever get the feeling that like that it's that she hasn't thought through what would happen as a result. Which I love.
Yeah, like she clearly, even if she hasn't told us, she clearly knows all the rules of the world.
Yes.
Okay, so those were the end of the guessing questions.
Yes.
So the next one is ranking all of the books, or slash attempting to do that.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I don't know. I just thought it would be fun to discuss, even if we can't come to a final conclusion.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It was hard. There were some of the rankings that actually really surprised me. Like I knew my top 2 and I knew my bottom 2. But a lot of other things I didn't realize were my favorites until I was like having to rank them. So I don't know, Hannah, if you want to go first, like if you want to do one at a time, or
Yeah, I think
I don't know.
if we both have things that are tied, it's going to be hard to like both do the
Yeah,
ranking.
I didn't officially do any ties. The only ones that I listed together was the Fly By Night and Fly Trap. I made myself like I force ranked these. Like I did not do any ties,
Okay,
even though
let's do
there
it
might be some ties.
I'm gonna go ahead and guess. Well, okay, actually, do you want to go from the bottom or from the top?
Ooh, maybe from the bottom.
Okay.
So the Big Finish is our favorites.
Yeah,
Are we gonna try to
we
guess
both
these
have
for
the
each
same two.
other?
I'm gonna guess that we both have the same two favorites.
I think so.
That.
Yeah. I agree. Yes.
Okay, yeah. Let's start from the bottom then. We both already said which ones were our least favorite, but we can discuss why if we want to.
Yeah. Good idea. Yeah, my least favorite is Deep Light. It's the only book of hers I've ever given under 4 stars, and it was like a combination of things. I think part of it is just that it was such an unpleasant reading experience that even when things were written well, I like didn't want to pick the book up. But like I think even more than that, I just didn't like some of the plot and characterization choices. I don't feel like there were as many supporting characters to really get attached to as usual. I thought I found like I liked the thematic stuff about identity a lot. But some of the like world building and the way that played out in the story, I think like the directions of plot in, I didn't like. And I wasn't as into the setting as I expected to be. Like I love water adjacent fantasy, and I didn't really I found the islands they talked about, or like the mainland, more interesting than the actual place that it was set. And I was this is the only Frances Hardinge book where I've been a little bored in some sections of it, which might have been because I didn't have as many characters to really enjoy. Yeah, I guess that's the best I can do.
Yeah, I've said that my least favorite was The Light Tree, which, yeah, I think it's the only book here that I gave it. I think I gave it 3.5 off the top of my head, but like if it had been by another author, it would have been lower.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't as much of a fan of Faith as much as I love all of the other characters,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't think the themes were as nuanced as usual. I thought it lacked the friendships, which, as we've discussed, are my favourite part. And like most of all, I wasn't a fan of the way religion is dealt with.
Yeah. As you were saying, definitely not as nuanced as her themes usually are. And another thing I know we both had an issue with for that one is, even though like we liked the themes about, you know, like feminism and, you know, women being able to do science and stuff, the way it was handled was like very heavy handed in some places, which she doesn't usually do.
Mm.
So, yeah. I didn't mean to like fill in your answer for you.
No, I mean, you're right.
Okay. And then next up from
You know
the
what? We could
bottom.
guess. I'm
You
gonna
want to? All
guess
right,
what
let's
yours
try
is.
it. Let's try it.
Actually, I was gonna guess that it was A Skin Full of Shadows because I know that was your least favorite before, and I think it's still not your favorite. But I don't know if you liked the Fly By Night ones less.
I am going to give you points for that because it was the Fly By Night series, which surprised me. Was one of the things that kind of surprised me a little bit. I guess not as much as some of these, but yeah, like for a while, A Skin Full of Shadows was my least favorite. But I think even though there are so many like specific things that I love about those books, like the setting and like some of the characters and stuff, like as a whole, I don't love them nearly as much as some of her others. Um, okay, and then for your second least favorite, I'm gonna say maybe Deep Light. Is that?
Yeah, I'm really sorry, I win. I know we both didn't like
I'm sorry.
it. Yeah, similar reasons as you. I think they just didn't bother me quite as much.
Mhm.
I think it was really well written, but I like Hardinge's friendship just like I didn't find it boring. I thought it was well written, but it made me
Yeah,
so uncomfortable that I didn't enjoy reading
yeah,
the book. Um,
because he was
but
really the character that was in the book most, like after the main characters. So it's like if you dislike the book, anytime Jelt is there, you're in trouble.
yeah, I did really like the settings. I thought the islands were really interesting, um, but again, I didn't love the discussion of religion. I thought it was more nuanced than the lie tree, but still not what I would have liked to see. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting that that is so inconsistent in her books because like some of them, like A Skin Full of Shadows and Gullstruck Island, I think have a lot more nuance to the discussion, and it's just like I don't know, it's interesting because that's one of the only themes I feel like she does where like sometimes she's like very like thoughtful about it and sometimes not as
Yeah.
much in our perspective. um yeah. Okay, so next up, so this is like I'm still thinking of this is like third least favorite.
Yeah.
um
All right. Yeah, I'm not sure I can guess from here, to be honest.
okay, you can feel free to jump in and go first if you want. I'm like looking at the list of books to try and make a guess for you. um okay, I'm gonna say the Fly Trap and Fly By Night books for you. That would be my
Um,
best guess.
um, Not quite yet. I think Skin Full of
Okay.
Shadows is my
Wait, can I give my runner up?
yeah.
My other guess was A Skin Full of Shadows. Okay. I was
Yeah.
stuck
I mean,
between
I
those
did
two.
yeah. I did like A Skin Full of Shadows. Like everything from here up is stuff I did like.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I guess I just wasn't as connected to it as
Yeah.
some of the other ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my third from the bottom, which I think is actually I feel like this had to have been one that I was surprised at when I actually sat down to rank these. The Lie Tree, because for a long time I thought of that as my favorite book by her, and we talked about this in the discussion. But I think it's actually one that has some of my favorite moments in it, and like some of my favorite like side characters, um, or I guess like one or two in particular. And I really like the way that twist played with the themes of the book. And I think all of those things made me think as a whole the book was a favorite. Or maybe it might also just be that there are things about that book that I have less patience for as I get older. I think that could be part of it as well. But Yeah, surprising to me because we went from like my favorite to ranked third from the bottom. But as you're saying, Hannah, it's like from here on up, I mean, I really enjoyed all of these. Even Deep Light, which is not my favorite, there are things about it that are so well done. So it's like your least favorite Frances Hardinge book is kind of like still a good book. Yeah. Okay, next up on the list. I guess I kind of cheated at this one because I gave you 2 guesses for the last one. So I'm going to guess this is where you put Fly By Night and Fly Trap.
Yeah, I did have them. I think I liked Twilight Robbery more than Fly By Night, but I did have them both as 6 and 7, so we can do them together since you did yours together as well. Like we've been saying a bit, I think that like the writing in Fly By Night isn't quite as strong yet. I think the writing is still really good, but the plot is kind of everywhere.
It's a little chaotic feeling, like yeah.
Yeah, and I really love Moscow and Clint and Saracen.
Yeah.
And like I think the side characters in Fly By Night are great. And yeah, I think there's some really interesting themes there, but they're just not quite as polished as some of the other ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I should have been writing down which ones you've said.
I can tell you the ones that I've said so far if you want to put those down.
It's okay. I'll remember.
Like I could do this.
Yeah. I'm gonna guess A Skinful of Shadows for you, just because I know you liked it more this time, but I also think of the ones that are left, you like the others more.
You are correct for the reason that you said. Yeah, I was like pleasantly surprised when we reread it, and it is higher up than it used to be for sure. But as you said, I just love the other ones more. Yeah, Howard and the Lie Tree. Yeah. Okay. This is where I think I stop having guesses for you until we get to the top 2.
Yeah, there was very little to choose between the next 3.
Yeah. I do feel like, okay, here's my prediction, is I feel like our tiers have the same books in them. It's just like which order they are.
Yeah.
So like this tier, I don't really know for you. If I had to pick one, I'm gonna guess Unraveler for you is next. But I don't really know. Like I feel like you like the other ones more, maybe. I don't know. I'm not very confident.
Yeah, no, I honestly don't even know what my answer is either. I think I'm gonna guess Cuckoo Song for you, but again, for no particular discernible reason.
The one, this is, I think, the hardest one I had to rank, like this group, because like we've been saying, it's like our favorites and our least favorites were pretty easy, but the ones that it's like I really, really love, but they're not like my super favorite, I struggled. So the one that I officially put down next is Verdigris Deep. But now that we're talking about it, I am doubting that.
Yeah, I really feel like for these 3, it changes by the minute. Like
Exactly. Yes. So we can like guess these and rank these for fun, but we don't know.
Yeah, maybe should we just talk through the 3 of them, because
let's do them all together. Yeah. So this is the Cuckoo Song Unraveler Verdigris Deep tier. Yeah. Do you want to just share what your ranking was, since we can't guess these?
I wrote down Unraveler, Cuckoo Song, Verdigris Deep, but honestly, like I said, who knows?
I think mine is actually the reverse of yours, because I also had Unraveler in the middle, but Verdigris Deep I had in the lowest spot and Cuckoo Song in the highest. But as we've been saying, I don't know if that's true. If you ask me in like 3 minutes, I'll be like, different.
Yeah, especially like if we're we're about to discuss them, I'll definitely have a different
Yeah.
answer at the end.
Or even like as we're talking through some of our other answers, I'm like, oh, I do really love that. Like I'm thinking, I'm like, maybe Red Degree Deep would be on the top for me too, because I think also one of the things that made ranking that one really hard for me is that I'm not used to thinking of, like, if it's an author I love and they write a bunch of different genres, contemporary is usually my least favorite. So I'm tempted to almost rank Verdigris Deep even higher because the fact that it is a contemporary fantasy, but I loved it as much or more than some of her others. Like, I don't know. I'm overthinking it, but yeah. Julia said, Cuckoo Song, we had no choice but to stand. It's a really good one. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and I feel like I love them all for such similar reasons as well. Like the main characters in all of them are so
Yes.
similar, and like even like some of the themes between Unraveler and Verdigris Deep are quite similar too, in terms of like friendships and
Yeah.
wishes and
Yes, which is interesting because Verdigris Deep is one of her earliest books, right? I mean, because we read it after her first series, like we read that out of order.
So I think even her
Second book,
yeah.
which is really interesting. Yeah, like I think, like you were saying, it's like I love the same things about them, but they are in such different flavors almost that it's like hard to rank them against each other. Like not quite apples and oranges, but a little bit like that because like, yeah, I love the main characters. I also think it's interesting that we have one historical fantasy, one straight up fantasy, and one contemporary fantasy. And so it's like there's such different like subgenres, but they all do their subgenre so well. And yeah, like I love the themes in all of them. I think also maybe one of the reasons that I put Cuckoo Song on top, besides having one of my favorite tropes in it that I almost never get to read, I'm wondering if one of the reasons I ranked that one so high is because like Trista's character arc is something that just like specifically gets me in my heart every time, where it's like, am I even a person? And I'm like, yes, you are. Yeah. Eowyn said, totally agree that Verdigris Deep is one of the best contemporary fantasies I've ever read. Yes, like I'm so impressed at how like there really is just one fantasy element, but the way that it colors the whole setting is just, I think, really fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, and then so the last two, clearly we both have the same two.
Yeah.
I think we probably had them opposite ways round, but really there's such a tiny gap between them that
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Go ahead and list them if you want, but
yeah. So I had A Face Like Glass at the top, and then Girlstruck Island, but Girlstruck Island was a very, very close second. Like I said at the beginning, like I knew A Face Like Glass was my favourite, but I really, really loved Girlstruck Island this time round too. I think Face Like Glass just edges it out on sheer whimsicality. But yeah, they're both amazing.
yeah. And I basically have the same argument for the opposite order. Is like I love them both so much, and I just love Gullstruck Island a tiny bit more. And if I had to pick, I think if I had to pick a reason why, it might be Hathin, because I do love Neverfell, and I love her character arc and her relationships and the way that she just like loves people into being a better person. Like I love that. But I think Hathin I love just a tiny bit more because she is so ordinary, and that is like not that's like celebrated in the book. And I love that she's just like a whole like a deconstruction of like the chosen one trope. And yeah, like I love them both, but I think maybe it comes down to the main character for me.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think I also love Neverfell, and even though I love A Face Like Glass as a whole, that slightly bit more. I I think I do love Hathin more than Neverfell as individual characters.
Yeah. but you can't go wrong with either of them. That's our bottom line.
Yeah, I'm looking at Eowyn's list. It's really interesting to me that you have Fly by Night and Twilight Robbery so far apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and having as a side character that was the main character, just like Ryan. That's true.
Yes. Yeah, and that's something that I love and that Frances Hardinge does a lot, and I think that's one of the reasons why I like consistently love her books. I mean, even in Unraveler, you get a little bit of that with Nettle. Yeah. Okay. So I think that was our challenge mode. Being forced to rank these books. And then do you want to take the next one too, Hannah, since I'll be doing the like kind of surprise questions?
Okay, yeah. So then the last, I guess, like mutually planned one was potentially recommendations for people who are new to Frances Hardinge, because I definitely think there's places you should start and places you shouldn't start.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I had 2/3 options. I don't know.
I think I kind of do as well. And it's interesting because I think my answers are not necessarily borne out in like the relative popularity of her books, which I think is funny. I don't know if you want to go first, Hannah, or if you want me to start.
Okay, well, the one I've been recommending to people throughout this project is Verdigris Deep, which to me is a fairly obvious starting place, partly because it is the shortest, and as we've spoken about, I think her one consistent weakness is potentially pacing. I know the length of it and the slowness of some of the beginnings have put some people off some of the other books, and I think the shortness of Verdigris Deep works in its favour in that sense, and also because it's mostly contemporary, it's potentially easier to get into, and I think the writing is also less high flown,
Yes.
as a corollary to that. So it's a good place to get a sense for the kind of characters and the kind of themes that she likes, but maybe an easier entry point than some of the others.
Yeah. I agree as well. It's funny because I hadn't thought of that as a starting point until you were mentioning that in our live shows. Like for some reason I just hadn't considered it. I think probably because it's sort of the odd one out of her books, in terms of like setting and genre. But that I also put that one on my list this time, I think for the reasons you mentioned. And I think especially it would be a good starter specifically for people who don't read as much fantasy. Like if you want to try her but you're not sure, like if you don't read as much like fantasies like me and Hannah, for example, but you want to try Frances Hardinge, or if you like fantasy but you're a harder sell on whimsy, I think it would be a good place to start.
Although I should add that I don't this is the one I've been recommending to people, but so far I haven't had any feedback on whether it how people have found it. So to me this is the obvious place to start, but whether that's actually true, don't know.
To be determined. Yeah.
I will say that I think this is the book that got me into Frances Hardinge, because I read Fly By Night before this and I didn't like it at all. I was just way too young to understand, especially since the plot is such a mess. But this is the one that after this I was like, oh no, I actually do. And I was still only maybe 9, but it was after this that I went and then read more of her work. So
And Eowyn said, I think the historical fiction is a natural segue into her books because it's less difficult than the hardcore fantasy. Also Verdigris Deep, but maybe after. I read all the hardcore fantasy first, but not everyone is a complex fantasy fan. Yeah, and that is part of what's informing my recommendations as well. The only reason, because I was thinking about one of her historical fantasies as well, and the only reason I didn't pick one for my list is because I feel like I feel like they might, like, Cuckoo Song is my favorite of her historical fantasies. But it's very weird. And even though it's weird in, this is going to sound so stupid, it's weird in less weird ways. I still don't know that it would be a good starter. I mean, I guess you could say like the Lie Tree because it's mostly historical, but I mean, it's like neither of our favorites. So like,
Yeah, and I kind of don't feel like the Light Tree is really representative of the rest of her work.
yeah, yeah, and it's interesting because that one won the Costa Book Award, and it's one of the ones that people know about. And then Deep Light is, I feel like, just in my experience, seems to be the one that if anybody has heard of Frances Hardinge or read her books, that's the one that they've usually read. But I don't think that would be a great starting place either. Yeah. So anyway, that was all a very long answer to say that Verdigris Deep is also on my list. And then I think what I have been telling people is a good starting point is Gullstruck Island, and not just because it's my favorite. I feel like, as Eowyn was saying, some of her fantasies are very complicated, and even though Gullstruck Island is definitely very rich and very complex, I feel like the overall structure is more of a traditional fantasy setting. Like, you have a fantasy world that you learn about. There is like a mystery element, but there isn't as much weirdness. It's not a whimsical fantasy, and I think that can be an easier entry point for people. It is longer though, and like, I don't feel like the start is slow, but I feel like other people could. But also, it's like a revenge story, which I know that people tend to enjoy. So there's like a lot of things about that one that I think make it a more accessible fantasy. So that has been the most common one I recommend as a place to start. But like Hannah, I haven't actually gotten any feedback really. Yeah. So that's my guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think the themes, even though it's a longer one, I think the themes and the character work are enough to pull you in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did have Cuckoo Song on mine. I agree with everything you said though. It is very like weird and kind of, I don't know, an odd one. But the I think the relationship between Trista Penn and Violet is potentially a good like draw, good thing to bring people in. And yeah, like potentially for fans of historical fiction, or like, I don't know, I think the idea of grief, the way that's explored, I know quite a few people who kind of, that's a buzzword for them, or like a nuanced and good exploration of grief. And for horror readers as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the creepy aspect of that one would be something that works for people, and also the I think the big twist would also be something that people would enjoy.
Yeah, but it's hard to recommend things on the strength.
I know. It's like, I can't tell you why, just read it. Which is kind of like recommending any Frances Hardinge book. Like, just trust me. Eowyn says, she agrees with my assessment of Gullstruck Island. I have recommended it to fantasy fans. Yeah, I think it's a fantastic fantasy novel in its own right, and it shows enough of the things that she does in her books that I think it's a good sample, but it's not like the weirdest that she can go. Like, to ease you into the weird.
Yeah.
And then yeah, the only other one that I had like officially put down is Unraveler. And this might be partly because I have heard several people say that they either read it as their first Harding and enjoyed it, or this was the one that they like bought that got them interested in trying her books. So maybe this is affected by that. But I feel like it is a little bit more on the weird side, but it is not as confusing weird. And it is a little more like a traditional fantasy than some of her others. I also think the fairy tale aspects are things that would play really well to fantasy readers in general. I think the main characters are great. I think the only thing that's like a little bit of a wild card is like how people would like the kind of overall structure of the plot, because it is a little bit like vignettes at the beginning, which I really enjoyed. I liked that kind of mystery like subplot almost. So that's a little iffy for me, but in general, I feel like it kind of like we've been saying for some of these others is like it does the things that she's really good at, but in a way that isn't so bizarre. So that would be my other recommendation. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That was my third like question mark one, which is, I think, like you, I've been influenced by a few people who've said that they've picked it up, because in my initial review I said that people shouldn't start with this one,
Mm-hmm.
and when I first read it I was quite sure about that, but and I think that was mainly because it is so like you were saying about the vignettes, there's just so many characters,
Mm-hmm.
even though her plots are often complicated, this one felt just kind of wild, in a way that was like more than usual, but I think like, and that, like, it's a couple of months on now from when I read it, and I think the plot, even though it's big, it is coherent, like compared to something like Fly By Night. It's complicated but it's not incomprehensible.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I
and yeah,
agree.
I agree with everything you said about like the fantasy and the fairy tale.
Yeah. Um, and I mean, like with any recommendation of where to start, if there's one of her books that specifically interests you, that would be a good starting point. You know, this is just like, I think more for people who have no idea where to go. But yeah, I like that we all picked we picked the same ones. Um, yeah, I do think it's funny that objectively the most popular ones of her books, like we didn't recommend necessarily. Um, but yeah, I think these are good choices. Did you want to include any? Because I know you mentioned this a little, that you like specifically like do not start with this one unless you really want to.
Yeah, I would say Fly By Night.
Yeah.
Even though like it was her first published one and it might be the one that, seems the obvious place to start, I would definitely say that,
Yeah.
like we've been saying, the plot is kind of everywhere, and even having read it more than once, I'm still not entirely clear on what
Yeah.
happens at the end.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely think it's a good book and worth the read, but I wouldn't say to start with it.
Yeah. I, as much as it pains me, I would say A Face Like Glass might not be a good, unless you are specifically into whimsical fantasy, like dark whimsical stuff, and or you like really rich writing and world building, and you're okay with the whimsy making things a little complicated. Like there are definitely people where I would say like, oh yeah, definitely start with this one. I think you'll enjoy it. But like to a random fantasy reader, I would not necessarily recommend that. Eowyn agrees. Do not start with Fly By Night. Yeah. I think it's impressive that I think was the first one I read from her, and I was like, I love this. Give me more. It's like, I mean, I also wasn't a kid when I read it. I was like an upper teenager, I think, but
Yeah.
still.
Like, yeah, I think there's definitely things to love about it, and enough to love about it if that's the kind of thing you like, but
Right.
it's not necessarily the best showcase of what she does.
Yeah. And then another one I could go either way on this one, because there's like a specific audience that I think would enjoy it, but I also wouldn't call it generally recommendable as a starting point, which is A Skin Full of Shadows. Because even though I think the premise, like the ghost aspect, would interest a lot of people, especially if they like creepier fantasy, I think because it's a historical one that is pretty long, I think, and also very slow paced. I wouldn't recommend that one unless you are specifically into very slow character based like historical books. Like of her historical fantasies, I don't think that's a good one to start with. I would recommend Cuckoo Song over that one, or even The Lie Tree, if that specifically interests you. But yeah, like I did enjoy A Skin Full of Shadows, especially on reread, but I don't think it's as widely appealing.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I agree about A Face Like Glass as well. Even though it's my favourite, I think it has a very slow start, and it's very long. So if you're a plot-driven reader, I think you're going to be put off quite quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing I say about that one too, if I've like talked about enjoying the book and I'm like, okay, if you pick this up, here's what you should know. I feel like I always need to tell people, like, if you don't like Neverfell at the beginning, just like stick it out. Because I know that one of the things, like a lot of people I know, one of their least favorite character traits is like being naive. And she is very naive. For me, that's not something that bothers me if I understand why. And I think she has a very good reason for that. But I also know that that can be what makes it feel slow to get into, is if people are really frustrated with Neverfell. So that's another reason that I would recommend A Face Like Glass for a very specific kind of fantasy reader, as like a starting point. Otherwise, not. Yeah. Okay. Should we do our surprise questions? So there were a few that I came up with that Hannah has not been prepared for. So feel free to take a little bit to like think about them, because obviously you didn't prepare answers for these. But these are just some ones that I thought might be fun to talk about. So first one is, we've talked a lot about side characters that we love. I want to know who your favorite side character is, specifically that you love out of all proportion to the amount of time they have in the book. Because I just want to know that.
I think it might actually have to be some of the ones from Fly By Night. Hopewood Vertellis, and also I can't remember his name, but the highwayman guy.
Oh yeah,
just so great.
He's fun. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, like there are other side characters I love, but I think they're more of like mainish characters.
Yeah.
Whereas that highwayman, he's just so great, and he's only there a tiny bit, and like you never expect him to come back after you meet him the first time, but then he does, and he's.
I know. That's a good answer. I love him. So the one I thought of first, I have two answers actually, but the first one I thought of, and basically the reason I even thought of this question, is because I wanted to talk about Erstwhile from A Face Like Glass, because I love him, and it was so funny reading this book again and being like, he's barely in it for like most of the book, and yet he's like one of my favorite characters. I just love him so much. I love him and Neverfell's friendship. Yeah, just like all their interactions, and also the way Erstwhile's character plays into the themes of the book, but he also is, he still very much feels like a character, you know? I love him. And then my other one is Paul from The Lie Tree, because I just find his and Faith's dynamic fascinating to me. And like I was saying before, like some of my favorite scenes from that book are when they are interacting in very unusual ways. And yeah, I'm a sucker for that like reluctant allyship kind of thing. And I do feel like he was a standout character in a book where overall the side characters weren't as compelling as some of her others. I just find him really interesting.
Yeah, you know what, I agree about Erstwhile. I think of Erstwhile as having more page time than he does. You're definitely right about that.
Yep.
And I do really love him. And yeah, don't think I love Paul as much as you did, but he's definitely an interesting character, and Howard too.
Yeah, I love Howard too. Everyone also said about the which ones to start or not start with. I think perhaps the Civil War setting could be hard for people in A Skin Full of Shadows. That's a really good point. Yeah. I think especially for like non-UK readers, like speaking for myself, we do not learn very much about the English Civil War at all. And even rereading it this time, and obviously knowing a lot more history than I probably did the first time I read it. Actually, maybe not, because that was only a few years ago. But even like having learned more and read more, like it definitely wasn't as easy to follow as other historical periods, just because I feel like it is less common as a setting, and also less common just to be taught about in schools. Yeah,
that's fair. I think that's probably a regional thing. It didn't bother me at all. But yeah, if you're not, if you didn't go to school in the UK, it might be an issue.
Yeah. Okay, so next question. The character that you most want a spin-off for?
Ooh.
I know, it's hard, but I think I have my answer.
Interesting. Like any of those vignettes in Unraveler could be.
I know.
On their own.
Yeah.
But I feel like some of the side characters in Girlstruck Island, all of those, the ones who I can't remember anyone's name now.
I know.
Certain characters, but the Revengers.
Yes.
Some of them must have fascinating stories.
Do you want me to go? Or is your... Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you had like a final answer, if you were just like any of these would be good.
Yeah, I think those Rangers characters.
Okay, that's a good answer. Eowyn said Hathin. Yeah, it's funny because she's like the main character, but it's like I would read like a whole series with her as the main character. Yeah, my answer is Selfin from Deep Light, because I loved her, and I really like basically all my favorite parts of the book were parts that she was in. And I do understand, which we talked about in the discussion. I think probably Frances Hardinge was being very careful about how she wrote her and how much she like centered the book on her, because Frances Hardinge is not deaf. So I understand that, but I would love to see maybe a deaf author write like a whole novel following Selfin, because I found her so interesting and so compelling and sympathetic, and like she was she might have been my favorite character in the book. Like I did really love Hark as well. I would love more about Selfin. I thought she was fantastic.
That's a really good answer too.
I love her. Okay, so I guess you kind of already answered this one. So another question I have is like your favorite gang or like squad of like friends. And I also said the one from Girlstruck Island. Like I just love their whole group. I love their relationships with each other. I love how they each like we get a little bit about each of their lives and a little bit about their character arc. Like there's one, I can't remember most of their names either. Is it Thorat? I think. He was really interesting, and he's the one who like treated Hathin like a little sister, and like it was just, I love all of them so much.
I love them, and there's also Tomki, the like
yes,
the one who's desperate for a revenge quest. He's just great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did mention Cuckoo Song at the beginning, I think.
Yes.
Trista. Oh, actually, if there was another spin-off, well, or like a sequel type thing, well, Trista of Triss, the original.
Yeah, that's Triss. A good one.
But also like Trista and Violet's adventures after the end of the book. I would definitely read that. But I think also Verdigris Deep, Ryan and Shell, and also the people they save, whose wishes they break, all of them together, I think are a great group.
Yes. Yeah, I like that and that answer a lot as well. Okay, next one. I also feel is very difficult. And I just added an answer. So now I have 3 choices for this one. But I thought one of the things that we ended up talking about a lot is like the relative creepiness. And if you had to pick the creepiest Frances Hardinge book, what would it be? And would also mentioned the guys from Verdigris Deep. Yeah, I love that group so much.
I mean, my instinctive answer is Cuckoo Song, just for the sheer, all the things she eats. Like, it's really creepy. But also, like, the Light Tree has some really creepy moments. And so does Deep Light.
Interesting. I also put Cuckoo Song on my list, but my other 2 were different. I said, besides that one, I said A Skin Full of Shadows, just because I feel like the being filled up with ghosts thing is so creepy. And that was one, I mentioned this earlier, where at least in my reading experience, it was like you kind of thought you knew what kind of like creepy things were going on, and then it was like even worse than you thought. And then my other one I said is because it's like one specific thing. Overall, I think this is one of her least creepy books, but I had to give a special mention to Unraveler because in no other book, I guess I should put the spoiler banner up for a second. In no other book does somebody eat their sibling. Like, oh my God. So I had to give like an honorable mention to that one, even though as a whole, I think it's one of her less creepy books. I just, that one scene, I couldn't believe it. I was like, did I just read that? Is that what I think happened? So, yeah.
Yeah, those are definitely good answers.
Eowyn also said Cuckoo Song without a doubt. I definitely think that's the one. That's one of the ones that I remember being most creeped out by the first time I read it, especially because, like, I didn't know what was going on with the main character. Yeah.
I definitely think Cuckoo Song and Deep Light are the ones that gave me the most like physical shivers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Deep Light actually, yeah. The more I think about Deep Light, the more I'm like, oh, those scenes with Gelt. Yeah. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, I think it's interesting about A Skin Full of Shadows because, like, yeah, objectively having ghosts in your head is terrifying, but the way it's written doesn't feel as creepy as some of the others.
Yeah, I think like especially the parts with Makepeace, like she starts out being really scared, and by the end of the book, she's like, "All right, climb aboard!" Like, I think the part that I find really creepy about that one is like especially like the beginning part. Well, like okay, the family stuff, what the family is doing, I think is terrifying, but also like the fear and tension of like if Makepeace lets down her guard for even a second, then like she's done for. Like I think that is what I specifically found really scary in connection with the ghosts. But honestly, you could make an argument for most of her books. I mean, even like Verdigris Deep, I have talked on and on about that scene in the mirror and how that like has stuck in my head for years. Like 7 years or something, or however long it's been since I read that book the first time. Yeah. I think bottom line, she's good at creeping us out. Okay. And then the last one I had written down for like the surprise question section, a little bit different. I thought it would be fun if we each like pick a time period and or setting that we would love her to write a novel in. I mean, not all of her books are historical, but I was thinking like, in the context of a historical fantasy. And you can be as detailed or as non-detailed as you like.
Interesting. I don't have an immediate answer.
Do you want me to go and you can
yes,
continue thinking? Okay, so the one I said, I would love for her to write a historical fantasy set in Renaissance Italy. I mean, I find Italian fantasy interesting in general, but I think she could have so much fun with like how messy all the politics were. And I just think it'd be a really fun. I mean, I'm specifically thinking of Venice. It could be such an interesting setting. I tend to like water adjacent fantasy, and I feel like she would do such a great job with that. I don't know, like if I'd want it to be one of her more historical ones or one that was just kind of vaguely flavored. I'd be excited either way. Ooh, I would love her to do a Tudor period one. That would be really interesting. I mean, honestly, I most things that she would write, I'd be like, yeah, I'm excited about it. But I just thought it'd be fun if like you had an idea specifically. Yeah, and I feel like just the atmosphere, like because she could take inspiration from the Renaissance period and like the clothing and the setting and everything, but then like work her magic on it and make it like different. So
Yeah, no, that's a really good answer. Um, yeah, I don't. It would have to be like an unstable period. I think she does. She
yes.
does those really well. Um, I don't know what would be a good one that she hasn't done because I think a lot of like British unstable periods are quite similar to each other, and I definitely wouldn't want it to be like a World War II one.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. This would be kind of funny because obviously she's an English writer, but I think an American Revolutionary War setting would be super fascinating as a fantasy book. Like I'd love to see what she would do with that. Um, I also just think that surprisingly, it's not a common period to set books in, like even for American authors, which I think is kind of funny. Like there definitely are like historical fiction out there, but I think like in this era of publishing, it's not nearly like it's very rare that I feel like you come across one.
Yeah, that's true. Like the first thing I think of with for American Revolutionary War is like Gone with the Wind, which is
Yeah.
like a not a good to be recommending, and also old.
Yeah. And that's like Civil War. That's not even like Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
So I know it's like there's like a few like really famous ones. And like I know that Anne Rinaldi, who I haven't read, but I have a few of her books now, she was like apparently a lot of people's like one of their formative historical fiction authors that they got into. And she has done several that are set during the revolution or around that period. But she was writing those like a few decades ago. I just feel like it's not nearly as common as like World War II, for example, or I do feel like World War One is getting a lot more popular as well, which I also do find interesting as a historical or fantasy setting. But she's already done that. Um, yeah, yeah. I just want more books from her. I think is like the short answer here. Um, but yeah, I think all of these answers would be really good ones. I'm intrigued by the idea. I don't know. I was thinking of like if she did one where there was a specific historical figure that she was inspired by, but I'm like she doesn't really do that though. Like and I like the main characters that she writes. So I don't know if she would even like need that. Um I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I actually what I would love to see is so like Fly by Night is a like alternate universe English Civil War story as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like there's a Skin Full of Shadows, which is kind of a direct setting, or there's Fly by Night, which is like totally out there, but still kind of the bones are there. So I would love to see her do that, like completely reimagine like any of the things we've said.
Yeah, that would be really cool. It's interesting to me that the fly by night ones are the only ones where it is such a loose interpretation of a historical period because all her other ones I feel like are almost completely historical and then there's like that one big fantasy element, like Cuckoo Song, Anna Skin Full of Shadows, and The Lie Tree. So it's interesting that she's like getting more historical as she writes.
Yeah, I don't even think of Fly By Night as historical fiction,
Me neither.
but it's clear that it's inspired by that, especially the like prologue bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I just thought of a kind of related question that I had not planned for, but Unraveler is kind of, well, I guess Cuckoo Song has some elements of fairy tales as well, kind of like general inspiration. And I know that she doesn't do retellings, but is there like a story that you think, I mean, because Unraveler even has a couple of very specific references to fairy tales,
Well,
like
even
the swan one.
yeah,
Yeah.
we've also seen Alice in Wonderland comparisons
Oh
before
yes,
with
that's
taglines.
right. That's right. Yeah,
Even
the
though I would
tagline.
never think,
Yeah.
like I don't think of that as a helpful comparison at all.
Yeah, I think the times I've used that, because I had forgotten that. I think the times I've mentioned like the tagline is like, what if Alice grew up in Wonderland and was trying to find her way out? And I'm like, sort of, but not really at all. Like, that's not, I mean, I can see it communicating some of the like tone, because like Alice in Wonderland is also super wacky. um yeah, I would and this is because I obviously love retellings in general. I love Frances Harding, and I love ballet retellings, and I think that we don't get nearly enough of them. So all of those could be factors, but I would love to see her do like either like a Swan Lake kind of thing, or the Firebird. I just want more Firebird retellings.
You know what she would do really well? Is it Coppelia, the one with the doll?
Yes. Oh my god. Yes. That would be such a good one. Yeah, Coppelia would be an awesome one. She could just do the kinds of things she already writes. Um, I also would love her to do a Little Mermaid retelling, because it has that water fantasy. It has like an unassuming main character, and I think she'd be really good at characterizing somebody who can't speak, like I just feel like she's good at like characters and situations where it could be hard to get to know them if they were by another author. I think she's really good at writing them. So I would also love all of these. I like want her to write all these things that we're talking about. I keep looking to see if she has another book deal. So far, nothing.
Yeah, you know, ballet retellings. The Nutcracker, like out of all the ballet retellings, the Nutcracker I feel like is the one that's done more than others. But I
Mm-hmm.
also think like her kind of creepy version of the Nutcracker could be really good. Also, I don't know. You can see that I have a guest behind me.
Baby, what is your vote, Pippin? What do you think?
He's been sleeping on my raincoat. You'd think like the bed would be more comfortable than my raincoat,
Yeah.
but apparently not.
Okay. Well, I agree with Pippin, whatever he said. Um, yeah, I think she could do something amazing with the Nutcracker. I mean, honestly, like most ballets, I feel like are very suited to her style of storytelling. Like, I would love to see her just inspired by like the ideas of La Sylphide. Not necessarily like a retelling, because I think that's basically a tragic romance, and she doesn't tend to do romance centered stories. Um, but I feel like the kinds of like fair folk that she is inspired by, I feel like the sylphs could be uh along those lines. Or even like the Willies. I'm not sure how to say that, from Giselle. Yeah, I think those any like kind of creepy but also sad forest vibes. I'm like, she'd do great. Like creepy but sad. Um yeah. Okay, well now that we've given our Frances Harding our list of things that we want her to write, any other thoughts,
Yeah.
questions,
I had one
rankings?
question.
Yes.
I don't have
Yes.
an answer for this, but
Okay.
um, two characters from different books who you think would be friends, not main characters because that's too easy. They're all too
Yeah.
similar, but side characters or villains.
This is a really good one. I'm gonna need a minute. Let me think.
Yeah, like I said, I don't have an answer either, but I think it's a fun thing to think about.
Hold on, I'm gonna need more than a minute. Like, let me look at my list again. Yeah, I keep thinking of like main characters. Okay, I have one half. Can it be a side character and a main character?
I guess so. Up to you.
Well, okay. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. Okay. Kind of a weird one, but I am intrigued by the idea of Shell from For Degree Deep and Triss, like not Trista, but Triss from Cuckoo Song, even though we don't see her very much. I think like I would just want to see they both need friends. Honestly, this is because I was like, I want Shell to have more friends. So I was like, who would be a good friend for Shell? Ooh, Nettle and Ari, though. Interesting. Yeah, Josh and Jell, like, I think have so many similarities. They're like different versions of the same thing. Julia said, my mom just called me, so I had to mute, but I see tutor period in the chat, and yes. Yeah.
I'm kind of thinking some combination of Pen and Selfin and the girl Lalo from Twilight Robbery who smuggles chocolate.
Oh, yeah.
I don't like. They just feel like they fit together.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Story checks out. Yeah, I'm trying to think of any others. Because I wasn't really thinking of like antagonistic characters. I was thinking more of like supporting characters. I think that's my best answer is Shell and Triss. I think also because they both have like, I mean, Triss just because of the way the story is told, but Shell, like in the actual plot of the book, is like, you know, not really used to being the center of anything, which I guess Triss is actually, but not like so much by the end of the book. I just feel like they'd understand each other. Yeah, that's a good question. That was very difficult.
Yeah. Okay, I'm also now thinking antagonistic characters. The guy, Shay Amet, the head of the Cursors in Unraveler, with the this is definitely a spoiler. The head of the Light Patriarch from A Face Like Glass.
Oh, yeah. Okay, speaking of him, what's his name? I think Maxon Childerson. Him and Lady Tamarind would be an absolutely terrifying power couple, but it would be so interesting. Like, because I feel like Lady Tamarind is like what Madame Appletine thinks she is, or she like is trying to be. So I kind of, this is probably also because I have a soft spot for Lady Tamarind and I want to see Maxon get what's coming to him, but I feel like she could take him. So I would like to see that. Yeah. Anybody in the chat, do you have any questions or other thoughts, hot takes? I feel like Regis Hardinge isn't even well known enough to have like an unpopular opinion about, but we can sure try. Let me look at my list. If there was anything we missed. Is there any Frances Harding book that we actually feel like we would have a chance of like surviving or like I don't know, if we had to pick one that we could like hang out in for a while and not have bad things happen, I think the only one, I mean, like maybe Gullstruck Island, maybe just because that one is not like actively trying to kill you in the world. Like, Eowyn, yes, that's a good one. The Grand Steward and the Glass Cardinal. Yeah, so my best guess is Gullstruck Island, because even though it's still very dangerous, I feel like it's not like Caverna dangerous.
Yeah, I feel like Caverna would be fun to like visit for a day, long enough, like not long enough to go mad or turn into like the kind of people that live down there, but just long enough to see it.
As a tourist spot, it could be fun. Yeah. Yes. And I was thinking like, because Unraveler, not like the deep wood, but like the regular part of the world, but I'm like, I know people can curse you way too easily. Like, that would be stressful. Yeah. The bar is that surviving. Yeah, I thought about a different way to say it, but I'm like, I think that's that's what we have to look at right now. I don't know that I would thrive in any Frances Harding world. Vertigo Deep, yeah, like I think, yeah, just don't mess with a well spirit and you'll be okay, since it's basically like the regular world.
Yeah, I guess like A Skin Full of Shadows, like you could just about live.
If you didn't have the abilities that, yeah, I don't think I could pick that one even if I didn't have those abilities, because just knowing that those ghosts are around would freak me out too much. Yeah, I know it's like as you were saying, Hannah, it's like she writes at periods of unrest, so even like her historical ones, it's like I don't want to be a part of the English Civil War.
Yeah, like, I guess the light tree, if you're not involved with the tree itself, is just Victorian.
Right. Yeah. I think I'll stick with Gullstruck Island as my answer. It's the only one I have a shot at, especially if I can just like stick close to Hathin. Please protect me. Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions, comments? Anyone in the comment section here? It has been a journey.
Yeah, thank you for suggesting it. This has been great fun.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for doing it, for hosting with me. Obviously have had the time of my life. Thank you guys so much for reading with us or watching us. Thank you to those of you who watch these live shows back, especially because they're always very long, because we talk a lot about Frances Harding.
Always late at announcing.
I know. Yeah. Thanks for being part of our pop-up read-along. It's like you never know when it's gonna happen. Yeah. I feel like there should be something else we say to wrap it up. Like, it's like we don't have future Frances Harding plans. I don't know. Maybe when she writes like 10 more books, we can do this again. But yeah, thank you guys so much. Exactly, Julia. They're long because we're passionate. I'm so glad that some of you, this was the first time trying her and you've enjoyed her. I'm glad that those of you who already love Frances Harding got to reread her. I mean, we know that at least a couple people have discovered her through these, so we have done our job. Yeah, Hannah, anything to add?
I think that's everything. Yeah, just thank you to everyone, and we hope that you've enjoyed it as much as we have.
Yes. And be sure to check out Hannah. I have linked her in the comments. And I mean, we both always have other content coming up, and also possibly other read-along things that we are still discussing and planning. Yes, Julia, I can't wait to hear what you think of these. Like, I think you're really going to continue to enjoy her as an author. I feel like a lot of the things she writes you'll appreciate. You are so welcome, Eowyn. Thank you for being so active and
It's been
passionate.
so lovely to get to know you as well.
Yes, I know. I love that we met you through Frances Hardinge. It just seems right. Yeah. Okay, everyone. I hope you have a good rest of your weekend or whenever you're watching this. Thank you guys again, and we will both see you later. Bye.